Is the GR Corolla less reliable than a GR Yaris? And guys, you've seen cases from around the world, and especially in the USA, where the GR Corolla is caught on fire. There was that first case, and we thought that was an isolated incident. And then there was a second case. And then there was another case. And so much so that Toyota had to come out and address the issue as well. And then you've seen those social media videos and footage of GR Corollas allegedly spinning their bearings on track, having a bunch of sensor issues, and having a bunch of malfunction and limp mode issues. A lot of this is happening progressively with GR Corollas, and just when you think it's over, you hear another issue pop up. What exactly is going on, guys? Because the GR Yaris that I'm in today, these cars came out in 2020. These cars came out much earlier than the GR Corolla. In Australia, these cars have been track mules, the GR Yarises. In the Australian heat, if you go out into any of the tracks, these cars are running there day and night. Not only that, guys, these cars have been modified heavily in Australia. A lot of these cars are pushing upwards of 600 horsepower out of a 3-cylinder engine, guys. It's ridiculous, but the GR Yarises have been doing it. And look, these cars aren't infallible, right? The GR Yarises have also had their fair share of issues. The early models especially, the transmission wasn't great. You had the issue of the second gear, guys. It would pop out if you were cruising in second. They also had not the strongest clutches as well. A lot of the clutches would go early. We don't quite know whether it's owners who are launching these cars really tough. These are all-wheel drive cars, so if you're launching an all-wheel drive car, you are going to end the transmission very quickly. So we don't know if it was the owners, but certainly in the later years, 2022 onwards, the transmission issues haven't been very evident. The GR Yarises, they also had head and valve spring issues, right? But that only came about if you modified the cars very heavily and you were running high horsepower numbers. Outside of that, guys, and mist shifting, where you send your engine to the moon, the GR Yarises have been fine. They haven't been catching on fire. They haven't had many complaints, but the GR Corollas have had way too many complaints. What exactly is going on? Is the GR Corolla actually less reliable than the GR Yaris? Let's get into it, guys. The number one thing has to be with the fact that the GR Corolla, in the earlier versions, now with the facelift, with the two cars, the engines are very close. With the early versions, guys, the GR Corolla engine was quite different to the GR Yaris engine. And that has to do with the fact that the GR Corolla made more power, a bit more than 300 horsepower. And Toyota didn't just slap on a tune. They made proper changes to the engine. They changed the exhaust and how that worked, changed some of the valve springs, even the piston alloy. A lot of that changed, and then, of course, they tuned the car as well. Many people out there believe that it's just the original G16E GTS engine from the Yaris, and in the GR Corolla, they've just cranked up the power a bit, but that's not the case. Toyota made physical changes and they made tuning changes. I can speculate here that Toyota didn't quite spend time testing those changes. With the GR Yaris, the G16E GTS, they really spent a lot of time blowing these things up and just testing them over and over again. And I think the changes that they made to the Toyota GR Corolla engine, as small as they may seem, they weren't tested as heavily. And that led, perhaps, with the added power to a weaker engine. That's sort of issue number one that I can see. Number two has to be with the American market, guys. You see, USA, in my view, is a proving ground. How does that saying go? If you can make it in America, you can make it anywhere. And I think it's not just with the GR Corollas, guys. Any car out there, BMW, Audi, Mercedes, any car out there, the more issues you hear about, they come out of the USA, guys, right? In Australia, yes, the German cars, for example, have a reputation for unreliability and they have low resale value. That's true in Australia. But you don't have cars spinning bearings and blowing head gaskets and all this jazz, all these stories you hear about in the USA. You don't have that as much in Australia. The USA, I think, is a proving ground, and I think part of it is that the owners there really push these cars hard, guys. They do a lot of autocross and track days. When you push these cars really hard, you're just going to have more issues, and the USA didn't get the GR Yaris. So who knows? If they were maybe being pushed as hard in the USA, you'd have more of them catching fire and blowing up. So I think that's definitely a factor, the USA factor, I think, where the GR Corolla has built up a bit of a reputation. Because in Australia, guys, the GR Corolla is a pretty solid car. No one thinks it's unreliable here, just like the GR Yaris. The next factor as well has to be the USA factor, and this factor is for tuning. Now, as I said before, Australia has heavily modified the GR Yaris. But USA has a different tuning culture, guys. USA, I've noticed, will modify any car right? Any car out there, and modify it in different ways. In Australia, there's people who modify cars and the rest of the crowd sort of leaves them alone. In the USA, everyone, it seems, is putting an air intake, is putting a spoiler, a body kit, XYZ. That culture is quite rampant. Big issue with the GR Corolla is that these cars are sensitive to modifications, guys. I've got a video on my page where I say, don't modify the GR Corolla and GR Yaris platforms, right? And I think even things like an air intake, these cars can be sensitive to. The modification factor with the GR Corolla in the USA has really led to a lot of these issues as well. Now, I can't really say for sure if one is more reliable than the other, but I must admit that if I'm going to own one of these for the long term, I would feel more comfortable with the GR Yaris, especially as this is the homologation special car. So in the long term, the values are better. Also, the GR Corolla does indeed now have a reputation. Whether you believe it or not, it's there. I don't think it's too crazy, but it's there. Do I think that these cars are as dangerous as European cars outside of warranty? I don't think so, guys. The 3-cylinder engine, let me tell you guys, I rev it hard every day. It is a solid motor. It is a good engine. Yes, these cars have some negatives. Yes, you should not modify them, guys, but unreliable, they are not. GR Yaris or GR Corolla, these are solid platforms. Take care of them, guys. Be very careful when you're modifying them. Do your oil changes in 6 monthly intervals. In fact, in Australia, the interval for the GR Yaris is 6 months, guys. Sometimes I'll have done 2,000 kilometers and I have to take this car in for an oil change. So do your servicing at really short intervals. Either of these cars should serve you well. I hope that helps, guys. I'll catch you next time.